Hi and welcome to my channel. My name is David Nates, and today I want to share with you guys my top 5 horror movies. Horror is one of those genres that makes some people cringe, whereas other people simply get excited by the thrill of living the fear that is instilled within the movie. Undoubtedly, humanity has always been filled with mystery. After all, if you look at superstitions throughout the ages, they have often evolved from things that humanity could simply not explain at the time. Kind of like how the Greeks had many gods, all relating to different aspects of nature. By giving all these natural phenomenon gods, the human beings in those days had a better time dealing with natural disaster, the grandness of the universe, life versus death, and simply with the unexplained. For example, let's take the myth of the vampire. The term vampire has existed throughout many cultures and for many centuries, but it was mostly popularized later on in Western Europe. The exact 100% origin of the myth is not known. In those days, we simply didn't have detailed records, but it is believed by some historians that during the Black Plague, which resulted in 75 to 200 million deaths in Eurasia, Europe, and North Africa in the 14th century, well, society not being able to manage the amount of deaths started stacking piles of corpses in the streets. They would be left there for days or weeks. In the mornings, people started noticing that the bellies of the corpses had expanded overnight, and with time, the hair and nails appeared to be longer. These were times where people didn't know the science of things. Today we know that dead bodies will bloat because bacteria in the gut begins to break down tissue in the body, releasing gas that accumulates in the intestine. Same goes with hair and nails. They aren't growing. A person's fingernails and hair may appear longer because the skin around them has retracted. Combined with the fact that the average lifespan in those days was 55 years old, this meant that if an elderly person lived a longer than average lifespan, they were sometimes thought of as having supernatural powers. The fact that they didn't really understand why so many people were dying, combined with bloated corpses, longer hair and nails, and a few elderly that seemed to be unaffected by the plague, created this myth of an eternal being living at night and feeding off of the blood of other humans. A history lesson aside, I've always been a fan of horror films, and I'd love to share some of them with you. The first movie that I'd like to speak about is a 2008 Swedish movie called Let the Right One In. They did do a British-American remake in 2010 called Let Me In, but I highly recommend watching the original Swedish version, as there's a level of eeriness that simply doesn't translate into the remake. In 2 words, the movie tells the story of Oscar, a 12-year-old kid who was often bullied in school. Living with his mother and depressed, he often steps outside at night in order to think. There he meets up with Eli, his strange new neighbor, who appears to be of similar age. They quickly become friends and create a close bond. As the relationship evolves, we quickly understand that Eli is not an ordinary child and may even be a vampire, connected to a string of local murders. This movie is extremely grim. Maybe it's the cold winter of Sweden or the darkness that it instills, but Let the Right One In is definitely not just a jump scare movie. It deals with multiple angles of life, such as the portrayal of a difficult relationship between 2 12-year-olds on the brink of adolescence. It also tackles the fact that Eli is neither boy nor girl. We're led to understand that Eli's genitals were taken at a young age, and even though young looking, Eli is actually much older and lives with a middle-aged guardian named Hakan, who might have been young like Oscar when they first met. That's just that thing about being a vampire with a childlike exterior. You are stuck in an ageless body that needs to rely on having a guardian in order to function in westernized society. After all, who would rent a place to a child or allow a child to work? Some sort of shelter must be acquired and money needs to be made. If you remove the vampire element, this is the story of 2 lonely children filled with sadness who perform dark deeds with apparently not much emotion. Maybe it's because they are filled with despair or simply trapped in a life filled with only darkness. What this movie manages to do is for the spectator to actually care for the protagonists, even more than they care for themselves. In some ways, this is a movie that is a psychological snippet of life exploring the brains of its players. The horror element is just the disguise of a much deeper movie. The second movie that I'd like to speak about is the 1987 film called Evil Dead, directed by Sam Raimi and featuring one of my all-time favorite actors, Bruce Campbell, who's known in the Hollywood world as the king of B-movies, with his signature style of quick-witted one-liners and comedic timing. Evil Dead 2 tells the story of Ash Williams and his battle against the demon horde in a secluded cabin in the woods. Being on a getaway trip with his girlfriend, he discovers an audio tape left by a college professor. This tape contains passages from a book deemed the Book of the Dead. After playing the tape and the words being spoken out loud, Ash's girlfriend Linda becomes possessed by evil spirits. We soon come to understand that leaving these woods is going to be difficult as more and more evil spirits are awakening and possibly leading him to a portal to hell. The Evil Dead franchise spawned 3 sequels in a series, Ash vs. the Evil Dead, that ran for 3 seasons. What's fun about Bruce and Sam Raimi, the director of the movie, is that they are childhood friends, and since a young age they made many home movies or low-budget films together. One of these short films was called Within the Woods, which also starred Bruce Campbell and was a proof-of-concept horror film to help build interest to potential investors. This led to the financing of the original Evil Dead movie. What's funny about Evil Dead 2 is that it actually somewhat feels as a bigger budget remake of the original Evil Dead with added elements of comedy and farce. Personally, I didn't enjoy the original Evil Dead. It felt too serious and was so gory that I didn't really feel for the characters in the movie. The sequel, though, takes the elements of the original and narrows it down to a more specific group of people, and by adding comedy and a deeper storyline, it creates an extremely enjoyable film. One of the most notable things about Evil Dead is the use of stop motion. One of the eeriest scenes is when Ash's dead girlfriend rises from the ground headless and starts dancing under the moonlight. Even though the 80s wasn't a time where huge CGI effects existed, by mixing stop motion, many practical effects that were either created through prosthetics or visual effects techniques of the time, we had this masterpiece of a movie which creates such an enormously interesting and varied space from an otherwise simple cabin in the forest. The third movie that I'd like to speak about is the 1997 movie Cube, directed by Vincenzo Natali. This is actually an independent Canadian movie that was made on a small budget of $350,000. What I really like about this movie is that it blends sci-fi with horror and mystery. The movie tells the story of a group of 5 strangers with all different skills and personalities who awaken in a cube-shaped room. None of the people in this room know how they got there or how to get out. The cube room has doors on each wall, totaling 6 doors per room, and each door leads to a room that is identical to the other one. Very quickly, the mystery becomes even more apparent when we realize that some of the rooms have traps. This movie is again an example of a horror movie that isn't built on jump scares, but more so on a tight storyline built around various characters and their relationships with one another. Cube in some ways is similar to how an escape room is. In order to get out and complete the mystery, you have to be willing to solve the clues. Each clue leads to more clues, eventually leading to an exit. Since the movie was shot on such a small budget, only one cube room was actually built as a set, with only one working door that could actually support the weight of the actors. In order to create differences between each room, sliding color panels were placed inside the walls of each room. By doing so, they could create different colors according to the different traps and mysteries to solve. Since changing colors was time-consuming, they ended up shooting the film out of sequence, shooting each colored room as the panels were changed. Another aspect of the film that added even more depth to the lore of the fictional cube is that the device in the movie was conceived by mathematician David W. Pravica. The way that the cube was conceived was with an outer shell of 434 feet and an inner cube of 17,576 cubical rooms, with each room having a coordinate located at the base of each door. The characters in the movie eventually realize the coordinates, and with that are able to determine the movement of the cube. I'm not going to pretend I understand all the math in the film or want to bore people with it, but the fact that the director went to such great lengths in order to create a plausible structure within a plausible mathematical theorem just shows how much depth there is to such a low-budget film. The fourth movie that I'd like to speak about is the 1984 film A Nightmare on Elm Street, which was written and directed by Wes Craven. I think that most people know this movie and its subsequent franchise, but I'm not sure that many people realize that the first movie in the Freddy Krueger saga is actually really well written and doesn't have all of that cheesy humor of its sequels. Plus, this is Johnny Depp's acting debut. If he hadn't acted in this movie, we may never have had his famous portrayal of Captain Jack Sparrow. So, for people who haven't seen this classic, A Nightmare on Elm Street follows several Midwestern teenagers who are attacked in their sleep by a mystical being called Freddy Krueger. If they die in their dreams, the same happens to them in reality. Nancy, one of the teenagers that is targeted by Krueger, investigates the phenomenon to find out that Krueger was an insane child murderer who was released on a technicality and then burned alive by parents living on their streets seeking vigilante justice. Wes Craven, the director of the movie, says that he created Krueger one night when, as a young man, he happened to see an elderly man walking on the side path outside the window of his home. The man stopped to glance at a startled Wes Craven and walked off. Initially, Krueger was intended to simply be a child molester, but later in the film development, he became a child murderer. Freddy stands for the worst of parenthood and adulthood. The dirty old man, the nasty father, and the adult who wants children to die rather than help them prosper. Personally, my scariest moment as a child was the Freddy Krueger's nursery rhyme, which was actually an adaptation of 1-2 Book of My Shoe. In this movie, the rhyme goes like this: 1, 2, Freddy's coming for you. 3, 4, better lock your door. 5, 6, grab a crucifix. 9, 10, never sleep again. As you can see, these are words that can simply make a child stay up all night. Again, even if you think the franchise is cheesy, do give a shot to the original movie, as it actually has a lot of depth in it and is very well written. The fifth movie that I'd like to speak about is the 1998 Japanese movie Ringu, directed by Hideo Nakata. Very fast, this movie garnered enormous popularity and was remade into an American horror film entitled The Ring, which actually led to even more American sequels. The Japanese movie did also have a sequel, then a prequel, and even a Japanese drama. The follow-ups to the original Ringu included the American remakes, which are worth watching for the most part, but will never have the same impact as the original film. I'll always remember the opening scene of the film, where two teenage girls are talking and one of them confesses that she saw a strange video where a long-haired girl pointed at the people watching the video from inside the TV and said that in 1 week they were going to die. All of this was heightened with the death threat being followed by a phone call. It's hard to explain if you haven't seen the film, but the build-up to the finale of the scene was so well written that it had me fearing receiving any calls after that. Ringu tells the story of Reiko Asakawa, a reporter who is investigating the death of her niece and 3 friends after viewing a supposedly cursed tape. She eventually finds the tape and promptly receives a phone call telling her that she will die in a week. Reiko, along with her ex-husband Ryuji, go on an investigation in order to find the origin of the tape in the hopes of breaking the spell. In my opinion, Ringu at the time was a completely new genre of horror. This was after all a Japanese movie, and the way that it was written and executed was so different than what anybody had ever seen previously in American-style movies. Again, this is not a jump scare movie. I do feel that in our day and age, with all the horrors happening in the world and violence being shown in video games and television, people are desensitized to violence and gore. So if someone wants to write a horror film and really grab the attention of the audience, the most important thing is figuring out a story that has more depth and characters for which the audience wants to root for. Watching Ringu, we start feeling the pain of Sadako, the girl in the cursed videos, and even though people have died by her hands, we inevitably start rooting for the antagonist of the movie. For me, these are the best horror films. It's the ones that make you scared, but maybe even more scared by the horrible events and the darkness of the world that is portrayed in the movie. As you can tell from my choices, I like to watch films from various countries. There's obviously many more movies that I can speak about. These were just some of my favorites. Some were obvious choices and classics, but others may be more hidden gems that you can discover, and even if you've already seen some of the movies that I've listed, sometimes rewatching them after many years can open up a new point of view on the whole movie and its characters. I really do hope that you enjoyed this video. Please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. Do check out my other movie reviews. I'll include a playlist at the end of this video. I look at many different movie genres and try to explore a variety of styles. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.